This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
I've come down to Canberra to do estimates, some investments, and I had to do some shopping because I like to cook for myself. And I went shopping, and guess what? I'm sure many of you are used to this. You buy these cheap rubbish bags that split and break on you all the time. I'm over it. I'm so angry about this. And 25 cents a bag. I'm sure many of you know how I feel about that. Of course, I had to buy it, didn't I? Because I'm in Canberra and I didn't carry my own bags with me.
Normally,
this is what you have to put up with. So for the cost of living, I'm telling Woolies and Coles, get your act together with
Just
the bags. You charge a fortune for it. Cost of living, people can't afford it, and it's ridiculous. I'm sure you're making a fortune out of it.
Come on, Pauline, say it. Have a good day. Thank you, Pauline. But say I don't like it. Can't you say I don't like it?
Just say the line, Pauline.
Say the
do you like it
line.
or do you not like it? I mean, is she wrong though, Tom? Is she wrong?
Well, I mean, she's wrong about everything in my view. So my default position is if whatever Pauline thinks is almost certainly wrong. These bags have pissed you off. Is that what you're saying?
Have they not? Like, they are pretty shitty. They break. And I do think having to pay for bags is pretty annoying. Is the argument like, do Coles and Woolies go, oh, we're doing that so that we can incentivize you to do the right thing, which is bring your own bags. We're trying to reduce waste. Fuck off. Have you seen how much plastic is on your shit? Get real. Come on.
I just managed to remember to bring my own green bags whenever I go to the supermarket. That's just something
I mean,
that
so
I
do I. That's why I don't use these bags, because also they're shit. Doesn't mean that I think that they should be able to charge money for them. I do just love, I love her vibe, her style when she just repeats her key lines. It's like if she's just like repeating back what, I don't know, the staffer has said are the key points for the video. And she's just like, yeah, so cost of living and
bad. But it's just like 25 cents. Pauline, we know that you're on at least $210,000 a year.
I love that, yes, that is the angle, is that she is personally impacted by having to buy these bags because she, like all of us, is struggling with the cost of living. That is patently absurd.
It seems like the comments, though, on her social, again, this is just from the news.com.au article about it, but it seems like the comments are not so much going in her favour. Nah, not plastic bags. Just take your own reusable bags. These old supermarket plastic bags used to deteriorate fairly quickly. Pauline, use reusable bags, woman. Not that hard. Plastic is a real problem in our waterways with marine life, beaches. Get yourself organised, not rocket science. I like to think that was a Greens voter. 25 cents is a fortune. I hope you don't drink coffee. No perspective, Pauline. Just buy your own reusable bags. Seriously, it's not that difficult. A lot of them are along this same
this is all
theme.
Very true. I guess, yes, this is her way of standing up to
well, this is like in the UK, Nigel Farage is like maybe going to be the next Prime Minister of the UK. In Australia, this is the right-wing populism that we're experiencing, and it's hard to take it seriously. I'm sorry.
Proud to be an Australian.
I did like this. There were some who noted Pauline's groceries didn't appear to be cheap, roasting the controversial politician, complaining about spending 25 cents while splurging on high-quality food, complaining about cost of living while pulling out the eye fillet is gold.
Yes.
Hypocrisy exposed.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Pauline.
It's the Constitution, it's Mabo, it's justice, it's law, it's the vibe, and no, that's it, it's the vibe. I rest my case.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Thanks, Pauline. We love you and support everything that you say and do. Welcome to Serious Danger, podcast about Greens politics in Australia. It's not an official Greens Party podcast. It is an official Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party podcast. And
authorized by P. Hanson.
Where she's asked us to please explain, and that's what we'll be doing. It's produced by Michael the Griff Griffin, and I'm Tom Ballard. I'm in Naarm on Wurundjeri and Bunurong country. Hello, Emerald Mood, my friend.
Hi, I'm in Manjin, Yoga and Turrbal Country, as always. This week, we are taking a look at the Optus outage scandal, the fallout continues, and maybe what it tells us about the failures of privatisation.
What?
And then, Greens leader Larissa Waters is getting a little bit of heat for an interview she did last weekend. So Tom is going to tell us, he's going to tell me, Larissa Waters' biggest fan, whether she stuffed up. Good luck, Tom.
I'm going to mansplain what this woman did
Yeah.
wrong when she was talking in
Great.
public.
Can't wait.
Thank you very much to our new patrons. Thanks for supporting the show. We love you. Jesus 124,
Jesus.
Emily, Anna, Andre, and a patron called Please Talk About Biodiversity. What a delightful request for a certain subject for us to cover on the show. We might get some time to talk about it briefly today. But thank you very much. For just $3 a month, you get to get bonus content every fortnight. You get a whole bonus episode from us here at Serious Danger. Thanks so much to everybody who's switching to the yearly model to support the show across Patreon. We really appreciate that. And we hope you enjoy, patrons, this sort of early release of a patrons episode that we put out this week. Emerald, tell us about this.
Yes, we spoke to the president of the UQ Greens, University of Queensland Greens, Drew Sims. They're also managing a campaign for the student union at UQ. Those elections are coming this week, which is why we released it a little bit early. They're managing this Progressives for UQ campaign, kind of green aligned as we learn how it works. But yeah, a bit of a deep dive into student politics, how it works, the critiques of it from to Tom and I, who really don't know much about it. It was actually quite enlightening. I enjoyed it.
I loved it. I mean, it was a good conversation about both how Stupol sucks for a whole bunch of reasons and how stupid it is and how it infects our federal politics to this day, but also saying that it could be good and progressive people getting involved and putting it in perspective, but also taking it seriously is a good thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And Drew really ups the average coolness of our podcast. So that's also a bonus. There are also, just quickly before we get into the show, there are just a handful of tickets left for our 200th episode live show in Melbourne on the Saturday, the 1st of November, 4 p.m. at Comedy Republic. That will be also my last weekly show before I stop doing the weekly episodes. And just head to the Patreon, and we're also joined by a special guest, Wil Anderson. So yes, just a handful of tickets left. They're $30. There's a link in the show notes if you want to grab them. And we would love to see a room full of beautiful, smiling Danger Dog faces there.
Yeah.
Emergency, which service, please?
My grandma's fallen down bed and Mummy isn't here.
One moment, sweetheart.
So could you tell me where you live?
At home.
The O Ambulance, Fire and Police Emergency Service is part of Telecom's ongoing commitment to all Australians.
Your Gran's going to be okay. And she's very proud of you.
All right. First story this week. The fallout from that deadly Optus outage last month is continuing, particularly in the Australian politics world. There were questions raised in estimates this week over who knew what and when. There's now a bill before Parliament to set up this 000 custodian and its powers to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. And there are continuing calls for stronger regulation of these telecommunications companies like Optus and for harsher penalties. But the question remains, can we really solve a problem like this while retaining a privatised telecoms system?
No.
No.
Goodbye,
all right,
everyone.
Next story. Perfect.
I'm with
So
Optus.
easy.
Are you with Optus? Are you?
No, I
should
used
I
to
leave
be.
Optus?
I was an Optus person, and then I think I switched. I think I then switched to Telstra, and now I'm with Belong. I think they're cheaper. I did a
Belong.
little comparison thing. Yeah.
Right.
I
Nice little
belong
plug.
with Belong. Thanks for making this episode of Serious Danger possible.
Thanks to all our sponsors. We appreciate
Yeah.
it. I'm so glad to get into this because it's like, normally this conversation is like, oh, fucking Optus, or God, there's no coverage, and God, the NBN sucks, or just like kind of like relatively in the grand scheme of things, petty complaints. But this was like, no, people fucking died. People died because of this. Yeah. Geez.
Yeah. If somehow you missed this, and I will say, like, actually, I found this quite challenging to prep for because, I mean, I knew the top level story, but there is so many layers to this and like confusion around timelines and all the different responses and like the history of how we could have maybe dealt with this before. It's like a little bit complex, but basically what a lot of people would have heard is on the 18th of September, there was this botched firewall update by Optus that ended up blocking hundreds. We now know about 600 calls to 000 in South Australia, WA, and the NT. So more than 600 calls couldn't get through. And as a result, at least three people.
Gosh, sorry. In the notes you've written, more than 600 000 calls couldn't get
which
through.
Which is 600,000.
Like,
600,000 calls, that would be a lot. But no. Well, and this is one of the things is that initially they were telling some people, e.g. the communications department, that maybe 10 calls couldn't get through. And then later they said, oh, no, a few more than that, about 600.
Just a little bit bigger than that, 600. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Do you remember, what did you think when you saw these headlines? Because I saw just a headline about, people not being able to get through to 000, and it kind of felt like that thing of like, how could that possibly be allowed to happen? Like, fuck, that could be any one of us, you know?
Yes. I mean, yeah, I don't know what exactly the details about this, but I guess in my head I've always been like, oh, you can always call 000, right? Like no matter what, no matter which provider you're on, yes, you can totally call 000, right? Because that's an emergency and people's lives are at stake. So I guess initially I saw it as like Optus outage, or like, great, another one of these. I think 2023 was another big one, but it was like, oh no, the level of severity here is pretty extraordinary. And yes, three people died as a result of those calls not being able to go through.
Yes, yeah, which they kind of uncover as, they finally realize what's going on. They get police to go and do welfare checks and then confirm that, 3 people died. So it is so extraordinary how kind of botched this response seems to have been. So many things have come out about this in the subsequent days and weeks. We now know that Optus failed to immediately respond to at least 5 calls from customers who were unable to contact 000 in the hours before it realized its systems had failed. So it had people calling being like, hey, just so you know, this is not working. And they're like, yeah. Those complaints were, of course, being directed to offshore operators who failed to escalate the calls properly. So, Optus coming out and saying, oh, our proper processes weren't followed. Like, I guess that's one of the things that they mean. It took 13 hours of this outage before access was restored. And what I didn't really kind of grasp was that it was actually not until the following day that we got the news, that the public were informed. So really, just pretty wild handling of this.
I think that's been the scandal that's particularly outraged people is, yes, the idea that, hey, what do you know? A corporation that's entirely motivated by making profit isn't fully honest and transparent with the public when it could potentially damage their reputation and their ability to make more profit in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, their share price, right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I am interested in, though, is like the political response to this, because I feel like immediately the, politicians of all stripes then have to come out, particularly Annika Wells, the federal communications minister, has to come out and kind of do that thing where they're like, we're going to come for them. We're going to be tough. But
sharks in the water, other sharks have entered the water.
Yes, exactly. It is like the social media. It actually reminded me of kind of Anthony Albanese when he was doing his showdown with Elon Musk. I can't even really remember exactly what was going on. Something about X. And he was like very keen on being like, I'm not going to shy away from taking these giants on. And like, that's the stance that you want as a politician, to be positioned as the biggest and toughest, and you're going to really crack down. But then at the same time,
Sorry, I would just love to see that attitude for fucking Woodside and Rio Tinto, please. But apparently they're the good corporations that are helping us in the transition. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. I mean, the problem, though, as it emerges, is that the government has been sitting on directly relevant recommendations from the fucking last time that this happened with Optus that they have failed to properly implement, that could have potentially prevented something like this from happening.
Oh, God. I did not know about this wrinkle, but that's very interesting.
You didn't?
No.
Yeah, this has been kind of, I would say, one of the major things that's made it difficult for the government, because the 2023 outage, this is another Optus outage, as you say, it affected millions of people, but I don't believe that there were any deaths as a result, even though people, yes, also couldn't reach emergency services then. There weren't deaths, but it was still a pretty major thing. Optus was fined $12 million, and there was this inquiry set up that then produced this report in March 2024 called the Bean Report. I guess it was someone Bean who did the inquiry.
Sorry,
Bean Report,
very serious.
Not Mr. Bean. Yeah.
Very hard to take
He's
seriously.
I know, so yeah, but it was serious. It was
This motherfucker can't even talk. He's telling me how the phone's going to work. Get out of here.
And so this is what Annika Wells is referring to when she comes out shortly after the news about this outage and says, yes, well, we've implemented 12 of 18 of recommendations from that report, and others are, quote, underway. The Guardian and others pointed out that the government had initially said it would enact at least 2 of those outstanding recommendations by April this year, so they are actually running behind.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main recommendations of this report is to establish a 000 custodian that has oversight of and overarching responsibility for the efficient functioning of the 000 ecosystem.
That seems like it would be handy, I guess.
Yeah, sounds pretty important, as we now know. And it turns out that so they had gone part of the way. They had established this position within the communications department, but it was not staffed. It existed, but not really. It was not doing anything. And I'm a little unclear on this, but the argument, but like, it seems as though legislation was required to enable it to perform its functions effectively, which the government had not introduced. They have now, of course. As of this week. So that makes it a bit, like, you can just imagine the conversations within the department when they're like, that was like on the bottom of their pile, and then they're like having this meeting when this happens, and they go, ooh, there's probably one person who was like, I said we should probably be prioritizing this access to life-saving services stuff, but you guys were like, ban social media for under 16s is the priority, so...
Did you see they just excised 4chan, I believe, out of the ban, by the way?
Yes, all the platforms. The kids can still access 4chan. Great. No bullying's ever occurred on 4chan, so that's good.
Great,
Nothing damaging or traumatic.
Better fire up the fucking 000 line, everybody, with these these kids that still having access to 4chan.
Yeah, better sort that out in time for that. Jesus Christ. And of course, you can imagine that, yes, not even imagine, we know that a big problem with implementing these recommendations is the pushback from privatized telecommunications companies like Optus, who were
corporations don't like being regulated. Like we have these public services, we privatize them, they become profit hungry. Oh, okay, right. Okay, that's because I thought like a well-regulated market was just the best way to do everything in life, but I guess there might be some challenges there.
Yes, they, for example, they were asked to share real-time information with emergency services, 000, etc., about outages. But they said in their submission, this would be a, quote, huge burden. Basically, it would just be too difficult for us. It would take lots of work. We've got money to make. And maybe the 000 custodian should do it instead, which is ironic, right? Because you are like, no, we, the private market, are the best ones to operate this system. However, the essential stuff, maybe the government should be doing that. Wait, hang on. How can I put that differently? You're really telling on yourself there.
Also, God, I'd hate for Optus to experience any kind of administrative or bureaucratic burden as a fucking Optus customer who's had to call this fucking company on multiple occasions and be put on hold and talk to 6 different people. God, heaven forbid anyone at Optus experiences what it's like being with fucking Optus for a second.
Oh my God. God, no, I know. Horrific. So yes, the bill has now been introduced for the 000 custodian powers. The media regulator, ACMA, is investigating whether Optus breached the law. And then this week, there are all these questions in estimates about when the minister or the department was informed. Have you been following that side of things? The emails sent to the wrong address and all that?
Oh, God, no, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, there was apparently the department had changed its email address like a week or two before, really, really recently. And so when Optus then did email, initially they sent it to the wrong address. I think they did ultimately, like they emailed, but I mean, Annika Wells and the department is basically arguing that Optus provided misleading information, which in this instance, it does kind of seem like they did. Like, I think there would be a temptation to be like, the minister knew and they covered it up and all of this. But you look at the emails that Optus sent them, and it sort of could be read as there's been this outage, we're conducting welfare checks, maybe 10 calls have been interrupted. And you're like, okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. Only the following day do you find out actually it's 600 calls and 3 deaths.
Whoops.
Whoops.
Yeah, God. Love to see clear communication between a communications company and the Minister for Communications screwing up email and providing clear information. Great. Good to know. Yeah.
Yes. The response from the Greens to this, so Sarah Hanson-Young is the Greens communications portfolio holder, immediately, like straight out the gate, was that response of we need tougher regulation. We need to end, these companies have been self-regulating for far too long. They need direct regulation. And also they should face significant penalties. We need to send this, quote unquote, this strong message that public safety comes first. They've said now that the legislation's been introduced into Parliament, Senator Hanson-Young said that when it comes to the Senate, they will be looking specifically at harsher penalties for the big companies, including criminal penalties being on the table for failures like this. I guess the thing is, and you sent me this article, which is kind of the crux of the conversation here. John Quiggin wrote in The Guardian this article titled Optus's 000 debacle is further proof of the failure of the neoliberal experiment. So effectively, not just this needs to be regulated, this market needs to be regulated better, but the problem is the privatisation itself.
And if people don't know, sure, I'm sure lots of listeners are aware, but yeah, John Quiggin is sort of like the privatisation guy in terms of, maybe not as far left or as radical as perhaps our politics is, but certainly an academic that has spent a lot of time detailing the failures and critiquing the neoliberal mindset, which says that privatisation good, documenting its various failures and laying out alternatives and sort of explaining that for a big part of Australia's history, a whole lot more was run by the public sector and it was better and good, and selling it all off has results in these kind of, shitty services, profit gouging, and a depleted public square.
Yeah. And I mean, we spoke a little bit about the privatisation of Telstra in the context of the NBN in episode 159, if anyone is interested in that, because there's history there. I guess the basic point is that Optus was introduced in the early 90s as this private competitor to Telstra, which Telstra itself was ultimately privatised in stages throughout the late 90s. And in 97, all restrictions on entry into the telecoms sector was removed. So Optus, it's this private competitor and was granted license to operate mobile networks, and Optus got this license to compete in fixed line as well. Now, Optus is, kind of state-owned in a way. It's just not the Australian state that owns it.
Interesting.
Yes. It was acquired in 2001 by Singtel, which is a corporation that is majority owned by Temasek Holdings. So Temasek Holdings is Temasek Holdings is owned by the Singapore government and owns 51% of Singtel. So basically, the Singapore government controls Optus.
Right.
Does that make sense? Did I explain that properly? Singtel owns Optus. Temasek owns Singtel. The Singapore government owns Temasek.
There you go. Yep.
Corporate structures are so good and clear and really normal.
Now, to be totally clear, and I'm sure the Singapore government would be involved, but I believe the Prime Minister of Singapore was interviewed this week, sort of responsive, sort of saying, yeah, shout out to the families, looks awful, but just to be totally clear, we have no liability to this whatsoever. We just make money out of this company. Yummy profits, absolutely no responsibility at all. Cool, thanks, man.
Yeah, good to know. Also, just as a side note, Telcom, or Singtel, earned $8.2 billion in 2023 to 24 financial year, but reported zero taxable income and paid no tax.
Gosh, that's great.
Really good stuff.
Thanks
so much, privatisation. So yeah, John Quiggin in this article, he points out that we used to have this single emergency call system that worked before privatisation and liberalisation. We now have multiple networks that are supposed to connect their calls to Telstra. Obviously, that system is failing. And he really pushes back on there is an idea that privatisation of the telecom system is a rare example of actually it has worked because we have got better services and they're cheaper than they were before. He points out, well, Telecom Australia, which then became Telstra, was already recording productivity growth rates as high as 10% per year. It was steadily reducing prices at the same time. Like, it was doing quite well. And then when you have privatisation, you see all these nonsensical kind of outcomes of a privatised market that shouldn't really be privatised. Telstra and Optus, for example, building parallel yet incomplete fibre optic cable networks. Like, they're just building the same shit, and then regional areas aren't even covered, but they're like competing against each other when you could just have one fucking network. That's part of what you see with the NBN failures. And the point is that, as John Quiggin puts it, telecommunications infrastructure is a natural monopoly. And that is evidenced by you still end up with like a duopoly or this increased consolidation of even a privatised market. You know, TPG and Vodafone merged in 2020. Now Optus and TPG share regional networks because it doesn't naturally lend itself to competition, to a privatized market. It should have just remained in public hands.
Right. I mean, a similar example is train lines, right? Like the insanity of privatizing the railways when it's like there's one track and there's one train going down the track at any one time. The idea that you can have incredible competition along here would be insane.
Yeah.
The only way to do that is if you had like parallel train lines running next to each other and building them, which would be insane, but that's actually what we've done with our telecommunications infrastructure.
Yes, that's right. And there's this article by Catherine Mackay for the Ethics Centre, which talks about these two features of a classic public good, which should not be privatised, that it's non-rival and it's non-excludable. Basically, like, people won't pay much. People won't pay for something from which they cannot be excluded and where the stock won't be depleted. And that is a feature of the telecommunications system. It's not like, she uses the example of a jumper, where if like I buy a jumper, there'll be less stock for someone else and like I could be excluded from having the jumper. That's not the case with this. Right. Instead, what you get with a privatized telecom system is them kind of bending over backwards to get the profit that they are designed to accumulate, because that's what a business is designed to do. And they're incentivized to cut corners. And like, they cut corners on the shit that's not going to make them money, like ensuring that people can call 000. That's not profitable.
Nope. No, this is not a sweet ROI on people being able to access emergency services there. So fuck that off. The offshoring, as you mentioned, I mean, this is insane. When I was researching for the book, The Privatization, Telstra, again, completely built with decades and decades of public investment, all public money going into making Telstra a thing, sell it off. Oh, surprise, surprise, let's offshore all these jobs. So fuck Australia. We don't care about that. We call about maximizing profits and minimizing costs. So yeah, sure, let's set up our call centers completely overseas. That'd be great. We can pay them less. They're less unionized. We can treat them like shit. It is, you know, let's be honest, often a more frustrating experience for customers to try and engage and get that, even though the people now at the other end of the line are doing their goddamn best. But it's just a race to the bottom to maximize profits as much as possible.
treating workers like shit, like not paying tax, and treating customers like shit. And similarly, like Optus was also fined around $100 million previously for this scandal around years of misleading, deceptive market practices and like
Right.
targeting vulnerable customers with shitty contracts. I'd have to look further into the details of this, but this was a whole scandal previously because, they're just trying to make a profit from a system that is not meant to be just like, its primary purpose is not meant to be to make a profit, and yet that's the model that's been set up.
Mm.
So John Quiggin kind of finishes by making the point that if we are to have competition in this system, the best model would be that of the NBN. He says that is a single wholesale common carrier which allows retailers using its network to compete for customers. So instead of kind of the infrastructure and then the carrier being all split between different companies.
Mm.
My question is, like, why do you think that the Greens, as, one of the parties that historically has stood up against privatisation, pushed for return to public ownership, particularly in recent years, why do you think they are still just on the, like, regulate harder, give them harsher penalties train, rather than pushing for a return to public ownership, or at least even calling out the failures of privatisation here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, God, nationalizing anything, where are the big calls for that? Even in things like, the Greens aren't calling to nationalize property developers. We're talking about, setting up our own publicly owned private
Yes,
company
to
to
compete.
compete in the private sector,
Mm.
right? And that's a much more sort of labor friendly model. In the past, labor parties were very supportive of government owned enterprises, right, which would compete, publicly owned thing that you put into the private market to compete with others, which is obviously short of nationalizing certain thing. Now, when you're talking about national telecommunications infrastructure, I think there's a very strong argument for doing that. But once again, our media and our politics is almost entirely still captured by neoliberal ideology. And so if you say anything crazy, like let's bring that back into public ownership, well, people call you crazy, I suppose.
You don't think that, I mean, yes, I think that that is true. Do you think there's also a part of it that fears that maybe Bob Brown's deal to sell off Telstra will be brought back up?
What did we get with that
we
again?
Did that.
What did
Something
he
about
was saying?
forests. I think it was like it was meant to protect forests, but then I think that ultimately it didn't even end up happening, maybe.
Yes. And he was like, well, they privatized Telstra and we didn't get the guarantee for the forest. So I was right. We got
Yes.
the worst of both worlds. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, again, I've been on the anti-privatization train forever. And I think that we do need serious conversations about that and serious policy proposals and stare it down. In the UK, the Labour Party said they were going to bring all these public services back into ownership. Keir Starmer was lying through his teeth, of course. They did. They are bringing the railways back into public ownership. That is one thing that you would say the Starmer Labour government is doing that is good.
Yeah.
But that's after the fucking awful, massive private equity firms that ran British trains ran into the ground, and there was a series of crises. So, I mean, you would think that something like this would be a trigger for that kind of conversation,
Yeah. And I think that, the Greens have called for nationalisation in a number of sectors, like the childcare policy, for example, that's where the Greens are pushing for full a publicly run sector as opposed to a partially privatised one. And the other one I can think of is Qantas. Like there have been calls to buy that back, although I suppose that, no, the Greens haven't necessarily called for a full nationalisation of the sector itself, but
we just wanted equity for the billions of dollars that we gave to them, for fuck's sake, which was, again, perfectly reasonable.
Yeah. But yes, when there have been, I think that maybe during the 2020 state election in Queensland, I don't even know if the Greens ended up releasing it as a formal initiative, but at least floated the idea of buying back private hospitals. And it did receive a fair bit of pushback because there's that thing where people are like, well, I get better services at private hospitals. And it's like, yes, that's bad. A two-tier system is bad. But it's true, it is somewhat outside of the realm of people's political imagination at the moment. But I do still think it's I think there should still be, it should be the job of the Greens to point out the failures of privatisation. At every turn.
As a system, like systemically, it's like you can have all the regulators you like, but we know again and again that a system driven entirely by profit will prioritize that profit over the quality of the services, the level of honesty, the level of corruption. I mean, like, remember the Australia Post bullshit from a little while ago?
Yeah.
That was sort of like, still publicly owned and still technically reports to the government, but is effectively been corporatized to the point in which it is basically.
Which, did you know it used to be the one thing, the Post and what became Telstra? Like that was all one big government
all
agency.
communications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up. Anyway. Yeah. Yes, John Quiggin makes this really great point about, the argument for regulation in this article where he says regulation is ineffective because companies have far greater resources than the regulators. That's, ultimately you're going to run up against that. And yes, you can say harsher penalties, but cost of doing business is pretty much the way that these companies see it, and they will look for more ways to maximize profits, cut corners at the expense of public benefit.
The Greens were criticised in the last term, and you lost a number of seats, for being seen to be too obstructionist. Are you willing to stand in the way of these environmental law changes this time, or will you be more cooperative?
Well, David, just pick you up on that. It was the Prime Minister that killed that arrangement that we were about to ink for stronger environmental protection. So I'm afraid it was the Prime Minister blocking positive reform in that regard.
How cooperative will you be on this one?
Well, we're very happy to have talks with the Minister, and those talks have begun. But unfortunately, the Minister seems to be sending signals that he'd rather do a deal with the coalition for shitty environmental laws that don't protect the planet.
All right.
And that
he is negotiating with both sides. That's clear. You've acknowledged that. Are there any red lines for the Greens when it comes to these climate laws?
Okay, last Sunday on the ABC's Insiders program, Greens leader Larissa Waters, Emerald's wife, gave an interview covering Israel, anti-Semitic violence, new environmental laws, and wind farms. An interview that has seen her slammed by political opponents and commentators. Well, that's what I've seen all over the place in the media. She's been called everything from undignified to deplorable to egregious, and by the Daily Mail as wild and foul-mouthed.
God, that's
a lot going on.
Yeah, okay.
It's a tricky one. I think this is an example of a lot of this criticism being completely unhinged, put out in bad faith, and can be easily dismissed. But I also think there were some moments in this interview where she did not handle things particularly well, and and did make me go a little bit like, ooh.
Yeah.
You've watched the interview. What did you think?
Oh, I agree with you. Like, some not her best answers. I personally have never had to do a live interview, let alone like one on Insiders, where David Spears is having a go at me and pushing me for answers. I think it looks really fucking hard. I get that that's her job, but I feel like sometimes you don't have a great interview.
I'm trying to think if she's been on there before. I think she must have at some point. A lot of the time, I think they prioritise the leaders. I mean, Max did it once or twice, but I mean, yeah, I'm sure in her time in politics, she's definitely been on the program before. But this is obviously her first one as leader.
Yeah,
off the top of my head,
it's yeah.
We're 5 months into the Larissa Waters leadership. Do you think she's cutting through a lot? Are you seeing much about her? I'll be honest, like a lot of the coverage to me was like initially about her becoming leader, a little bit of environmental stuff, and then honestly, this interview sparked the most number of articles about Larissa Waters across the media that I've seen recently.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I do still feel like it feels like it's really not been that long since she's become leader. And I think maybe for an ordinary person, you'd be like, that's a long time. Like, she's, no excuses to not be totally across everything. But I do think she's still pretty new into a different role. But I also don't think it's necessarily Larissa's leadership that is the reason that the Greens aren't getting a whole lot of cut through at the moment. Like, I kind of would agree with that. The Greens aren't really in the news. They're kind of not really in the zeitgeist, but there are some pretty obvious reasons for that. Like, they just were dealt some massive blows at the federal election, losing multiple seats, including their leader. And that's pretty dispiriting. We've spoken about that on the show. I think it's not a surprise that the Greens are operating at a slightly lower capacity at the moment. I don't think that that's really says anything about Larissa's ability to lead the party. I think she's been dealt a difficult job, to be honest. Yeah.
Poison? No, not a poison
Not
chalice.
a poison chalice.
It's not a Susan Lay's situation.
No.
I don't think it's quite that bad.
Yeah.
We also sort of hadn't had the big parliamentary fight, I suppose,
Exactly.
which is where a lot of the attention will come. We still haven't had that, which probably does look like it'll be shaping up over environmental laws, which I guess, we will come to. Let's start with some of the sillier stuff, the criticisms of Larissa. We begin, of course, as always, with the Daily Mail. Wild moment, foul-mouthed Greens leader Larissa Waters drops S-bomb on ABC Morning TV as she lays into the Albanese government for the ultimate betrayal. Okay, the S-bomb, is the S-bomb a thing?
I mean, in a country where it's been judicially determined that you can call people a cunt and it's not offensive, I think you're allowed to say shitty.
It's a compliment.
It's a compliment.
He's a good cunt. The S-bomb. David Spears, this is sort of in the second half of the interview. We'll come back to the start, which was the spiciest element, which has caused the most criticism, I suppose. But in the second half of the conversation was about environmental laws. And David Spears asks if the Greens are going to be obstructionist about environmental laws. He says in the last parliament they were criticised for being obstructionist. Larissa Waters brilliantly reminds him, actually, I think you'll find that it was Anthony Albanese who shot down the environmental laws, overruled his own environmental minister, Tanya Plibersek, when the Greens had negotiated a deal on that. So it's kind of weird that the Greens, you would say, they have a reputation for being obstructionist, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then she said, we're happy to have talks with the minister and those talks have begun. But unfortunately, the minister seems to be sending signals that he'd rather do a deal with the coalition for shitty environmental laws that don't protect the planet. She said that. David Spears kind of chuckles. He was a bit like, oh my goodness.
Oh my.
We've, of course,
where's my
had
pearls?
Larissa Waters famously, when she got the job, was like, people want Parliament to get shit done.
Yeah.
Is this an issue? Is Larissa Waters' filthy mouth going to get the Greens into job? Okay, great.
I just, no.
Good. Glad we covered that. I also enjoyed the Daily Mail's summary of the Albanese move to kill these environmental laws. Like, they wrote, in November, Albanese overrode then Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek and cancelled her deal with the Greens, which would have established a national environment watchdog. Correct. Albanese struck down the deal over concerns it would be weaponised by the opposition and the resources sector before the federal election in May 2025.
Great journalism from the Daily Mail. Great summary. They should show that to David Spears.
Good tip for you guys. Thank God he did that too, because the opposition, they didn't run hard on the Labor government.
No.
They didn't criticise them at all. They really used kid gloves. So well done, mate. Well fucking done, you fucking spineless asshole. Then there was the wind farms moment.
The reason I raise wind farms is because it is proving to be a contentious issue within the Greens. Some of your colleagues and your predecessors, Bob Brown and Christine Milne, have issues around certain wind farms, the Robbins Island one in northern Tasmania. Where do you stand on this?
Well, obviously, renewable energy projects need to be sited in the right location that doesn't have adverse biodiversity impacts.
And is this one the right location at Robbins Island?
Well, I don't know very much about that. It seems to be in a wrong location.
Plenty of your colleagues do. You've got some of your current Senate colleagues, Peter Whish-Wilson, Nick McKim, who are also opposed to it. You're not sure?
I have not. It's got to be put in the right place. And we will be looking at that closely, and it is not right to jeopardise biodiversity, but we will need a big build of renewables, and we will need renewables on households and businesses to help bring costs down.
Is when it gets difficult, right? When you come down to, okay, here's where we're going to...
Well, this is why we need environmental laws that actually work. No, this is why we need environmental laws that actually work, David.
I'll come to those.
At the moment, as you know, they don't even consider climate impacts.
Yeah, and I'll come to the environmental laws, but this project, it's proving very contentious, as I say. Christine Milne, Bob Brown, Nick McKim, Peter Whish-Wilson, they're all saying it's a bad place to do it because of the impact on the orange-bellied parrot. You seriously haven't looked at this?
No, I accept that renewables have to be in the right place. And if this one isn't in the right place, well, let's look at somewhere else to put it.
So yes, so Spears sort of references the Climate Change Authority's recommendation that wind power needs to be quadrupled by 2035 and asks Larissa Waters, do you support that? He then zeroes in on the Robbins Island wind farm project, and she responded by saying, I don't know very much about that. We're looking at that closely. Spears is quite taken aback, going, what? You don't know about this at all? Your colleagues are talking about it. Nick McKim and Peter Wish-Wilson. What's the deal there? Did you know much? Have you heard about the Robbins Island wind farm project?
Well, I just saw your note in the show notes that says, is this an example of debilitating Queensland brain? And yeah, maybe it is. Because I was like, what? What project? Where? What are you talking about? Sorry. Yeah.
I love you, Emerald. I love working with you, and I love your passion and how proud you are of Queensland and the great state, the greatest state of all, and the city of Brisbane. But yes, every now and again, there's a little bit of not everyone lives there, right? There's other shit going on across the country.
To be honest, I thought he said Rottnest Island. I could have sworn he said WA, and I was like, oh, there's that one turbine there. It's so interesting.
The Robbins
Island
Island
is actually a high profile
wind farm project.
You've heard about this? This is getting headlines, is it?
No, to be totally clear, I'm not totally across this either.
Okay.
But I'm not the leader of the Greens.
Neither am I.
Yes, true. It's in Tasmania. It's a 100-turbine facility that would be Tasmania's largest. It's fervently opposed by Greens Tasmanian Senators Nick McKim and Peter Wish-Wilson on the grounds that it threatens several endangered species. Yes. Environment Minister Murray Watt granted conditional approval to the Robbins Island wind farm in August, imposing 88 requirements on the operator to safeguard species, including the critically endangered orange-bellied parrot and the endangered Tasmanian devil and Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle. Jesus. Okay, they are all endangered by this, apparently. McKim and Wish-Wilson released a joint statement condemning that decision, saying it was the worst possible place anyone could build a wind farm. The approval of this obviously inappropriate project will only serve to undermine community confidence in our already flailing rollout of renewable energy, Senator Wish-Wilson said. Of course we need more renewable energy projects, but this is the wrong project in the wrong place.
Now, this
Bob Brown is also opposed to it, and I believe Christine Milne was also against it. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to get. That's really interesting because the way that David Spears framed this was Bob Brown and Christine Milne are opposed to it. So why don't you know anything about it? And if he had said, Nick McKim, your senators, the members of your team are opposed to it, why don't you know about it? I probably would have been more like, oh yeah, well then she probably should be across it, if that's a current Greens position. But I think the framing of Bob Brown opposes it, don't you, is just trying to set up that age-old fucking the Greens aren't the party of Bob Brown anymore and there's conflict between the old guard and the new guard. And B, it actually misses the most important point, which is that I would argue it's a more compelling argument that Larissa should be aware of something if her team is commenting on it. Sure.
Bit odd, yeah. Yeah. And I think it's crucial. I mean, eventually she settles on fuck.
Oh. Great. How long is that?
This never happens on Friday. Please disregard the fault. Fuck me.
Yeah.
They're going to play some tones, but I beg you to disregard them. Please don't regard these tones.
We've been infiltrated by Larissa Waters' team. They're saying, shut it down.
God.
Is it done? Or is it going to go
Well, normally there's a bit at the end where the guy says, okay, it's all over.
Thank you.
There we go.
Attention, the building fire alarm testing is now complete. Please acknowledge any further tones. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Please acknowledge the further tones. We've already done this joke, haven't we?
This has happened before, hasn't it?
Yeah, and we've gone, I acknowledge the further tones. Yeah.
Okay. What was I saying?
Where she settled on.
Yeah. By the end of it, she settles on, we need to put these projects in the right place, which is a little bit politician answer of we want to do the right things and not the bad things.
Got to stack up environmentally, economically, socially.
it's not beyond our capacity to do this, and we will need to balance the needs of local biodiversity with renewable energy kind of thing. So she does, yes, she did again get to a place in which she was sort of pretty confident back on and saying, this is totally possible. We can do this. We need environmental laws that appropriately protect nature, yada, yada, yada. But I do think it was a bit of a clanger that she isn't across this. And I think it's so important because this is key Greens business. As we've discussed on the show a fair bit, particularly with your research, this is a continuing dilemma that we find ourselves in. The need to protect local biodiversity conflicted with the interests of, if the Climate Change Authority is to be believed, quadrupling our wind power by 2035. Some calls are going to have to be made. And so, yes, I think it's pretty crucial that the Greens leader is across the details of these particular spicy projects.
I was watching this and thinking, what would I do if I were her right now, or what advice would I give her if I worked for Larissa? And I think if you don't know the project, all you can do really is be like, I don't know. And sure, maybe she should have been aware of it, but there are so many fucking projects across the country. But yeah, now knowing that we are opposed to it because it is in an unacceptable location, sure, then there is an answer to that, which is there are specific, for example, the LNP has just effectively cancelled. They've kind of said that they're going to revoke the legislation that enables this wind farm in Queensland, which was on a perfect spot, plantation land that, negligible ecological value, even though there's some crazies who are effectively just anti-renewables people who are opposed to it. It's actually a great spot for a wind farm. And so you can be well, there are fantastic locations for wind farms if that's what we need, that governments are cancelling. Yeah.
Interesting. Just briefly on environment, I thought, she was fantastic on blasting the government's targets and how poor they are, the climate reduction targets, and constantly bringing it back to needing to stand up to fossil fuel companies and how much influence companies like Woodside and Santos and stuff have in our politics. Loved all that. But Spears is trying to pin her on these red lines, going into negotiations for the upcoming environmental laws.
Can we ban the fucking red line thing? It is one of my most hated, because it's actually stupid. I know that the journalists love doing it because they think it's so tough because you can't answer it, but that she's not going to be able to answer it. And so what the fuck are you hoping to get out of this? Why are you trying to preempt those negotiations? You just want her to be you want to trap her into being that's a red line so that then she can't negotiate on that. Cool, great outcome, great journalism. Sorry, I just think the red lines discourse is so tired, and it's such a fucking old cliched crutch for journalists who want to think they're tough in Australian politics.
Yeah, he did it a lot on housing as well back in the day too, around that fight, which is if this thing isn't in there, if you don't get this, then you will vote it down, right? That's what you'll say, right? Now, I think, and particularly the red lines were on an end to native logging and a climate trigger, right? And the Greens have identified those as our two priorities going into these negotiations. I agree with you that yes, Larissa's not in a position in which she can't say, yes, we'll definitely vote it down if we don't get those two outcomes.
Yeah.
I think saying we reserve the right to vote no to bad legislation, I think is important, or at least
great if that's what he was looking for.
Right. But not on that particular question.
He's not saying, his question is not, will you vote down legislation in any circumstances? Are there any circumstances where you won't vote this down, or that's an interesting question. But the thing of being what are the red lines? I think that's a helpful question to ask if you are trying to report on something real that is happening. There have been negotiations, and that a party has settled on a red line, and that's part of a deal that's been made, then that should be reported to the public. But I think that the fact that he goes into this interview knowing full well that, as Larissa points out, they haven't seen the legislation. Negotiations clearly, that there aren't red lines yet. Asking about it just feels like a waste of time to me.
Yeah, that's fair. And no, I thought she handled all that really well.
Yeah.
Now, the spiciest part of the interview that has caused the most uproar was the discussion around Israel and the recent horrific attack in Manchester on a synagogue in which 2 people were killed. I mean, he started the conversation with discussion about this peace plan, so-called peace plan that we've got from Donald Trump and Israel. We haven't gone into it too much in the show. I'm sure lots of people are sort of going through it. There are moments of hope. If it stops killing for a short period of time, I like that bit of it. I think that's good. We've seen celebrations in Gaza. Yeah, I'm pro that. It drives me crazy. They say, the recent release of the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian prisoners. It's like they're hostages as well, my friend. But anyway, it basically says, the Greens support this peace plan process. Larissa calls out the genocide, calls for sanctions and an end of the two-way arms trade. Was great on self-determination, I think. They've talked about this idea of a transitional authority with Donald Trump on the chair, fucking Tony Blair on there and a bunch of billionaires. And Larissa Waters saying, self-determination means that there probably should be some Palestinians involved in that process, actually having a say in that. And I hated this presentation of, it's just a transitional authority. So they'll just oversee everything and set up all the structures and transition. And then some Palestinians, I guess, might get involved, I suppose. That's really bizarre. They talked about the flotilla. Larissa raised the fact that there were 6 Australians who were on the Sumud flotillas of 43 vessels and sort of saying it's ridiculous. Israel kidnapped these people. They arrested them. They abducted them in international waters where they have no jurisdiction to do that. They then brought them to Israel and then detained them, which is, again, a violation of all sorts of international law and a complete violation of their human rights. Spears sort of says, the Australian government has told Australians not to do that flotilla because of how dangerous it is. Are you saying that people should do that? And Larissa was a bit like, it's crazy that it's come down to civilians to do this to try and to deliver aid because Israel's implementing this war of starvation. She didn't full out say it, but she was sort of, saying these people are doing a very good thing and we should be proud of them. And the way they're being treated by the Israeli government is ridiculous. And went as far as to say that the Israeli ambassador should be expelled if they don't help to free those Australians and make sure they come home. Now, my understanding is I believe most people have sort of been released at this point and have come home. They are telling horrific stories of the way that people have been treated in Israeli detention, some horrific, truly evil shit. And people should check out David Adler on True and On this week where he sort of explains about his experience and it's pretty galling. There was a news.com.au article about Larissa Waters' comments here that I thought was pretty shitty. Greens leader Larissa Waters calls for expulsion of Israeli ambassador over detained Australians. Again, that word detained really doesn't tell the full story. They were abducted in international waters. This story doesn't mention any of the mistreatment that we've heard about. It talks about, the Australian government has called for Israel to abide by international law. So that's all they can do.
Or what?
Or what?
Yeah.
Or we'll be angry or whatever. And doesn't mention Israel's genocide once. And I'm sorry, any article about the IDF or Israel that does not acknowledge the fact that multiple human rights organizations, a UN Commission of Inquiry, and the Genocide Scholars Association have found that what Israel is doing is a genocide, that's shitty journalism. That's pathetic journalism that is not telling the full story.
It is absurd. Yes.
Also involved this line, Waters also said, we need to make sure the Australian ambassador in Gaza is getting those citizens back and shepherding them to safety. However, that role does not exist. And it's like, okay, clearly she misspoke and you know exactly what she's talking about. The Australian ambassador to Israel, which would relate to activities in the occupied territories. But anyway, news.com.au really got her.
Yeah, exposed.
Spears also asked this question about, does the Greens think that Hamas should play no further role in a future Gaza Palestinian government, a Palestinian state? And Larissa responded by saying, well, of course. And I think even Hamas has accepted that. Now, I'm like, really? I still don't know what this fucking means.
I still don't really know what that means. Yeah. It's a notably different kind of response to the one that Maureen Faruqi gave to similar questions a while back, right?
What was that?
I think we did discuss it on the show because she was really being pressed over and over again. I can't remember what show it was, but on whether Hamas should play a further role, should play a role in a future Palestinian state. And she kept coming back to self-determination rather than explicitly ruling out or saying, like, yes, Hamas should have no role to play. Whereas
it just drives me crazy. Hamas political officials are negotiating this deal. Okay, so you've got people in Hamas who, through mediated by other bodies, are playing an active role in going back and forth and negotiating this peace plan. Okay, so they're allowed to do that, but okay, maybe they won't be called Hamas. But again, if anyone who's played any role in Hamas over the past 2 years, like they just completely allowed from standing for any democratic office in the future.
Yeah, and maybe deliberately vague. I don't know. Yeah.
So again, I'd like some more details on that, please, Larissa, myself. But anyway, that's me. Anyway, then we had the question about these attacks in Manchester in a synagogue, and it went a little like this.
2 people were killed, as we mentioned, in that synagogue attack in Manchester the other day on the holiest day on the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. What was your reaction to this, and has it changed your view at all about the danger and the threat posed by anti-Semitism?
Oh, look, my heart goes out to the families of those people. No violence anywhere is acceptable, and this is exactly why we need a resolution that is based on self-determination, and why Australia should have, 2 years ago, imposed serious sanctions on the Israeli government, who have been conducting a genocide and starving people, children. It is utterly appalling, and yet we have been selling weapons to that conflict
Senator,
and not imposing the same sanctions.
Sorry to butt in, but I am asking you about anti-Semitism and the fatal attack we saw in a synagogue in Manchester.
And we've condemned, and we have condemned that.
Are more steps needed here to prevent a similar incident here?
Well, look, of course we have condemned that, and as I said, our hearts go out to those families. Violence on any basis is not acceptable, and we need to have social cohesion, and part of that is Australia doing what's necessary to stand up for humanitarian justice, and that's why we need those sanctions, and that's why we've got to stop selling weapons components that are dropping bombs on 12-year-olds collecting
you keep
water.
coming back to the weapons, but my question is about anti-Semitism. Do you support the recommendations of the government's anti-Semitism envoy when it comes to the further steps that are needed here?
Look, we oppose anti-Semitism just as we oppose violence on any basis. Now, the envoy's reports had a series of recommendations, many of which were quite bizarre. What we need to see is an anti-racist approach to anti-Semitism, to Islamophobia, to all of it. None of it's acceptable, but I think the reason why tensions are so inflamed is that we've seen a genocide for 2 years that our government has refused to condemn, and in fact has been fueling by sending those weapons. Yes, I do keep mentioning them because Australians are horrified that our government is entering fresh contracts over the last 2 years to both sell weapons and buy weapons from that regime, and likewise to fail to properly sanction that regime. That is adding to the tensions, and we need to actually send that strong message that a lasting peace is what's needed, and self-determination is part of that. Selling weapons is a key part of that, David.
I understand that point.
Right. There you go. That was the bit that has caused quite a bit of controversy. How do you reckon Larissa did in response to that particular question?
It was a bit of a strange response. Right? Like, it didn't, I was kind of surprised, actually, and I would love to hear from Larissa. Maybe I'll ask her at some point. Why she responded that way, because I do think it didn't really answer the question, which was about anti-Semitism, right?
And it was just a crossed wires thing. Like, I genuinely don't think Spears was trying to gotcha her out. I think he was genuinely surprised at her response. And I think even in some of the criticism, Pumpelson was saying maybe she misspoke or whatever. Like, I think everyone's a bit something went a little bit funky here.
Something was not right,
Yes. But basically, as people would have just heard then, a question about, a terrible, clearly anti-Semitic attack in which 2 people lost their lives during the holiest day of the year for the Jewish community. We know anti-Semitism across the Western world over the past 2 years has been rising, and it's horrific and it's absolutely condemnable. But yes, to bring that back to foreign policy and to try and
reiterate the Greens' position that, this attack, or to move from this attack to justifying the position as to why we should stop selling arms to Israel. I mean, she explicitly said, I think the reason why tensions are so inflamed is that we've seen a genocide for 2 years that our government has refused to condemn and in fact has been fueling by sending those weapons, and kept sort of bringing back to that point. Yes, the condemnation of the attack and the expression of sympathy for the victims' families did seem quite brief and perfunctory. And it almost, to me, it sounded like Larissa was almost getting defensive about as if Spears was trying to present this attack as, see, this shows that the Greens' position on the question of Israel and anti-Semitism is fundamentally wrong. And I just don't think that's what was happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the starting points that I would have, looking at his question, which was, has this changed your view at all about the danger and threat posed by anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
My question is, what is that? What's the premise of that? Are you asserting that the Greens have said anti-Semitism is not a problem, that it doesn't pose a threat, that it's not dangerous, when that wouldn't be the case? Unfortunately, it is, as we've spoken about many times, it can be difficult, particularly in the current media landscape, to have a nuanced conversation about the links between anti-Semitism and Israel and Gaza and the ongoing genocide, and also how treating anti-Semitism in this kind of exceptionalist way, as opposed to a part of broader, of racism and prejudice more broadly, is not necessarily helpful. That is it's then just kind of gone in this whole other direction, which is quite counterintuitive, because it does that. It almost does conflate Israel with Judaism by bringing it back to that when the question's about, an attack on a synagogue,
Yes. And it's just so important because, again, we find ourselves in this conversation again. But this was a clear opportunity, I think, for Larissa to unequivocally, completely condemn, show this, express sympathy and horror at this particular attack, make it very clear that the Greens are an anti-racist party that includes anti-Semitism, absolutely. Now, if Spears was going to lead to a conversation about Gillian Siegel's recommendation in her report on how to tackle anti-Semitism, you say, we completely condemn anti-Semitism, we stand against it, we're an anti-racist party. There are recommendations in this report that we don't necessarily agree with because they're bizarre, they've been criticised by lots of people, including human rights groups, and we can have that conversation. But yes, this sort of, it just again felt like something went off a little bit wrong, and Larissa wasn't fully listening to the question. Now, again, I haven't done one of these interviews. I'm not the leader of the Greens. I just think that this is it's obviously so crucial. Like, words are so important around this particular subject, and I want the Greens to succeed. I have a huge amount of respect for where the Greens have been over the past couple of years. I think it's vital that they're a voice during this genocide, calling out Israel for what they're doing, while also firmly standing against racism in all its forms. It's just such crucial, vital, important business that it's just crucial that when we're being interviewed about this stuff, we really listen to the question and we're really clear in making our position, I suppose. And I feel like on that front, she somewhat dropped the ball.
And so she did later clarify somewhat?
She did, yes. Just briefly, I mean, yes, some of the response to the criticism was often ridiculous. Coalition frontbencher James Patterson, a supporter of Israel, said Waters must apologise for her remarks or it will be further evidence that Greens have learnt nothing about anti-Semitism. It is completely unhinged to suggest an alleged Islamist terrorist in the UK cares or even knows whether Australia sells arms to Israel or that Jews might be less likely to be murdered while peacefully worshipping if we didn't. It is callous and cold to resort to standard Israel-Gaza talking points when talking about innocent people being killed for practicing their faith. Albanese said, I think Senator Waters' comments were undignified, not worthy of a senator. Zionist Federation President Jeremy Liebler said Waters' comments were some of the most egregious victim blaming we've seen since October the 7th. She's effectively saying Jews are responsible for their own murders. Now that is so offensive and so horrific. A complete overreach and a complete misrepresentation of what she's saying. And
I don't
pretty
think that's fair at all.
remarkable. Peter Wertheim, a co-CEO of the Australian Council of Australian Jury, said it was a classic diversion from the Greens leader. Like the Wizard of Oz, she desperately sought to direct the attention of the audience away from a truth that exposed her entire narrative as a fraud. After a perfunctory expression of sympathy for the victims, she quickly changed the subject to condemning Israel.
Why is that like the Wizard of Oz?
Well, I guess the Wizard of Oz is trying to present that he's a wizard, but he's actually
Seems
just a
totally
man behind a curtain.
unnecessary. You've kind of got a free kick here to be like, hey, these comments are off the mark.
Yeah.
And instead you've overcomplicated it. Right. For sure.
This is probably the worst one, I think. Our good friend, Labor MP Josh Burns, who is Jewish in this article, said Waters had made the most deplorable comments by someone who should know better and who's meant to be leading a major political organisation. I personally found the comments staggering. Either she misspoke or is completely unable to see the danger of excusing the violent murder of 2 Jewish people by somehow saying that it is acceptable due to her opinion of what is going on in Israel.
What the fuck? Where did she say it was acceptable? Sorry.
It never said it's acceptable.
Yeah.
No, yes. By Larissa Waters' logic, all Jews across the world are legitimate targets because of the actions of the Israeli government. Go fuck yourself.
This guy fucking sucks.
Yeah, either she misspoke or she thinks that all Jews should be killed because of it. Like, okay, which one do you think it is, Josh? Jesus Christ. And again, these are people saying like, trying to get political advantage after this horrific attack on the synagogue. What are you doing now in this follow-up with saying shit like that to the press?
That's
really gross and disgusting. I mean, yes, very clear to say she's saying nothing of the kind. Okay, absolutely nothing of the kind. Again, I critique what she did. I didn't think she handled it well to pivot so quickly and to associate this particular anti-Semitic attack with government foreign policy when it comes to Australia's relationship with Israel was a mistake. It was misleading and might have given the suggestion of conflating those two things. And that was wrong, and she shouldn't have done that. But the idea that she thinks that attack is acceptable, that Jews deserve receiving this kind of attack, just completely a misrepresentation of, and a particularly bad faith representation of what she was saying. And yeah, it's pretty disgraceful to say that kind of stuff, I think.
So did she say, sorry, just to clarify, did she say that was a mistake or I misspoke or?
I wouldn't say so. She gave a follow-up statement to the media explaining her remarks on insiders to this masthead, that's the Sydney Morning Herald, after they were made. Waters rejected any mischaracterization of her words. She said that ASIO had made it clear that the war in Gaza was fueling anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Okay.
Australia should have a fully funded anti-racism strategy which combats anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and Australia should also stop contributing to the genocide. Jewish people deserve to be safe from violence here and abroad, and Palestinians should not be slaughtered in their tens of thousands using weapons that Australia manufactured and sold to Israel. Now,
is this one of those situations where it's like, you get stuck in trying to explain the link that you were trying to make instead of just being like, no, I fucked up a little bit there.
I think some level of contrition there, sort of saying, I didn't express myself particularly well here. Here's what I think. I unequivocally condemn these attacks. I'm thinking of the victims. No one should be a victim of violence like this. The Greens absolutely stand against this. I mean, I don't want it to be cynical, but to sort of, to me, I would point to the role of the Jewish Greens within the party. I would talk to Jewish comrades who are out there, standing in solidarity against what's happening in Gaza.
Refer to the Jewish Council, yes. And even this kind of, this quote does that thing that I find, we've spoken about it before, like a little bit annoying, where it's always anti-Semitism and Islamophobia together, equal and opposite, like the characterization of, yes, and Jewish people have to be safe and also Palestinians should not be slaughtered. And in this instance, you really are talking about totally a different thing. Like you're talking about an attack on a synagogue. And yes, there may, I get that argument that ASIO has said that Israel's actions in Gaza, their genocide, is fueling anti-Semitism.
Yes.
But I don't know that you need to actually reiterate that here.
Well, particularly in the context of this, in which we still don't know, right? We just don't know about this attacker, right? And yes, the UK police claims that he may have been influenced by Islamist ideology. We just genuinely don't know. Okay, so I think speaking before that happens is a really bad idea. We saw that in an incredible display with the Charlie Kirk assassination. People just jumping to all sorts of conclusions. So also saying we just don't know. We do know that this is horrific and unacceptable, and no one at all should be the victim of racist violence in their place of worship or anywhere. Like, that's unequivocal. But yeah, I think that's sort of a step. Now, again, critics of Israel, including Jewish critics of Israel, will say, yes, the actions of the Israeli state is often fueling anti-Semitism across the Western world, and that's totally true. That's a legitimate thing to say. That's totally fine. To draw direct link here before knowing more details about Australia's foreign policy and our relationship to Israel and this particular anti-Semitic attack, was probably not a great move. But I also just want to make this final point, because the reverse is never true. Okay, so yes, we can critique Larissa here. The idea conflating all Jews, all the Jewish community with the actions of Israel is a bad and anti-Semitic thing to do. Absolutely. But when people point to an attack like what happened in Manchester and say, see, this is why we need to restrict pro-Palestinian protest. See, people who are criticizing Israel are fueling the same atmosphere that results in horrific violence against Jewish people. That criticism, that position is almost never criticized to the same extent as the reverse we've had here with Larissa. And in fact, in the wake of this synagogue attack in Manchester, we had Labor politicians introducing laws restricting Palestinian protests. There was a protest that happened like the next day, that was scheduled to have the next day, in solidarity with people on the Sumud flotilla, and everyone was saying, how dare you protest? Now is not a time for protest. It's anti-Semitic of you to protest in solidarity with people in this flotilla in the wake of this death of these two Jewish people. And you go, that's crazy. That's the conflation of the state of Israel with the well-being of Jewish people across the Western world.
Yeah, and no one is, out there talking about how heinous that is. Albanese is not saying that that's undignified or unworthy of a politician. So, yeah.
Anyway, hang in there, Larissa. We believe in you.
Well, Mr. McAllister, you would remember, I assume, blacking out 80 pages for a variety of different reasons if an FOI came across your desk, or is this just everyday practice in Home Affairs?
Yep. It's not, but I can't actually recall the grounds which are actually in the...
Well, they vary. A lot of it is 47 EC, 47 F1. They're the primary basis. I think certain of those relate to issues of national security.
Okay.
Does that ring a bell?
It does, yep.
Do you remember doing that now?
I do, yeah.
Okay. But you didn't... When I was asking if the official who did it earlier was in the room, you weren't... Well, I was asking the secretary if the official who did it was in the room, and you did it. Is that right?
I believe
you did this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Were you... The bulk of the reasons why this has not been provided to the public is for national security reasons. What is the national security threat of telling the public what the briefing materials were to Australia's public anti-Semitism envoy before they leave for the United States? What's the national security issue at risk here?
Senator, that might be difficult for Mr McAllister to answer without the document, without the original document in front of him.
And perhaps you could at least give us the number or something of the document. It sounds like Mr McAllister knows what the
he's
document
now. I think we've now established that Mr McAllister remembers blacking out 80 pages under an FOI request, and so I'm asking you about what you remember, Mr McAllister. And
it might help Senator Shoebridge to get answers if you could provide a copy of the document to Mr McAllister. It's pretty customary if you're going to ask about documents to present them to witnesses.
I can assure you it won't enlighten Mr McAllister in any way, because every single page has been blacked out by Mr McAllister.
That's pretty much the show. That's pretty much the
Shower
show.
whenever you're dirty. Have a great day, and we love you. Sorry, Tom, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yes, I meant to say, shout out to everyone who is heading to the March for Palestine across the country today. Shout out to all the heroes who took part in the Summit Flotilla, including the Australians and everybody. I think you're amazing people. Love you, Greta. Always have, always will. And yes, I guess we'll wait and see what happens with the situation in Gaza. Again, people celebrating, which is great to see. Yes, with bated breath. If it briefly pauses killing, that's great. The brutal takeout from The Onion has been Israel agrees to kill Palestinians on a less regular basis, which could be too cynical, but could well have hit the nail on the head. Last call for a Night of Humanity for Palestine happening this Thursday, October the 16th in Sydney at the Enmore Theatre. I'm going to be there. All the funds raised goes to Palestinian Australia Relief in Action, Olive Kids, Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and Médecins Sans Frontières. There are still just a handful of tickets left to that. It's almost sold out. It would be awesome to sell that one out. An incredible night of entertainment, and we'd love to see you there, Sydney folks. If you can't attend the gig, but you still want to chip in money to those great charities, you can totally do that. There's a link to donate via the show notes. Have a look there if you've got some spare cash and you want help.
Come to the live show if you haven't got tickets already, and leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on socials at Serious Danger AU. Love you very much, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Serious Danger Australia.